based around a marketplace site. And the marketplace site you can think of a lot like Kayak, but for tires, or CarGurus, but for tires. And so we're building out this whole vertical SaaS business that's built around this marketplace site. So that's what we're doing. I won't spend too much time on TireTutor because it's not about TireTutor today, but that's just what I'm up to today. So I'll give you a little bit of my backstory, and then we'll jump into what everybody came here for, really, which is to talk about churn and how to save our customers. So before launching TireTutor, which we launched in August 2017, I worked for a company called CarGurus, which is today the largest automotive shopping platform website in the country, and they're in, I think, like 7 different countries now. And so I joined that company when we were quite small. I was the 20th employee. We were in a house in Harvard Square. I joined the company as the first salesperson for the company, the first person doing B2B inside sales for the company. And so I was really lucky in the entire journey and being able to join that organization. I started there when we really didn't know how to sell to car dealerships. And to tell you guys what we were selling there at CarGurus, we were selling SaaS subscriptions to our car dealerships to allow them to advertise their vehicle inventory on our website, basically. So if you're a car dealership and you're in the business of selling cars and you want to get more consumers, more audience, more exposure, you could advertise on our website. So I joined when I think we had 3 or 5 direct customers, paying customers at the time, somewhere around there. It was less than 10. And then got in there, got on the ground floor, started selling our SaaS subscriptions to dealerships to advertise on our marketplace site. And then when we hit 52 dealers, they asked me to build out an inside sales team doing essentially the same thing. So I was really, really lucky and had the opportunity to grow that team from basically myself to, to about, I hired, I think, close to 150 people while I was there during my 5 years, and ran a team of about 100 people, launched CarGurus sales, B2B sales for CarGurus in the United States, Canada, along with Jimmy Gogan, who's in the picture with me down at the bottom. And then also helped launch CarGurus sales into Germany as well. So it was an interesting ride. We were pretty disruptive going into the space. And so we definitely had our fair share of kind of shakeouts, not just like this pandemic that's happening today for sure, but we had our other situations that really kind of impacted our ability to retain customers. So I think I can speak a little bit to what my experience was like there and some of the tactics we used. So I'm looking forward to jumping into that. But that's a little bit of my backstory. And so left CarGurus to go to MIT Sloan to do my full-time MBA, to have like a safe space to work on TireTutor, and gave birth to TireTutor in August 2017. And that's what we're doing today. So any questions, any of that on my background before we jump into real content? All right, awesome.
Good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it was kind of a crazy ride. So I joined in 2012, left in 2017, right as we were about to IPO. And, at CarGurus, we had launched this marketplace site, and I left when we had 20,000 subscribed and paying dealers. And I joined when we had like 3 or 5 paying dealers, right? So we went from 3 or 5 people, dealers, to 20,000. And along the way, we had to be quite aggressive at how we acquired acquired dealerships to our platform, and acquired vehicle inventory to our platform. So that meant that, sometimes we were working through channel partnerships to acquire dealerships to our platform before we converted those dealerships into paying customers. And what that meant is that if you look in the automotive industry, it's a pretty type of staid industry, I guess I would say. So it's an industry where things haven't changed that much in that industry for a long time. And so when we started bringing on dealerships to our platform in kind of a disruptive way, sometimes we, along the way, slightly disrupted associations in different states, and some types of dealerships who didn't like the transparency that we were bringing to the industry. And so we definitely had our fair share of kind of fallouts, so to speak, where we were having struggles with masses of dealers at one time who were either threatening cancellations or were canceling, and so we had to figure out how to get through those situations. And so I think that has some parallels to probably what we're all facing a little bit today. So that's the background of kind of the struggles we endured there through CarGurus with dealers churning at high velocity sometimes. And we had to figure out how to fix that.
Jason, one quick detail question from the group. What was or is a monthly subscription fee to be listed on the CarGurus website?
What was the fee?
Yep.
Yeah, great question. So when I started there in 2012, our average MRR, average like monthly ACV per rooftop per dealer was about $300. And today it's around $1,500. And so that brings up an interesting point. One of the things that they did a lot there and still do today is, like a lot of companies, reassess pricing as the company delivers more value to their customers. And so, the same dealers that maybe we were charging $300 per month to, $3,600 a year to in 2012, might be paying $17,000, $16,000 a year today, right? And so, we increased our audience of consumers coming to our website to shop for vehicles. And as we increase our audience of consumers coming to the site, we increase our prices to our dealers. Sometimes at levels beyond what our dealers thought might have been appropriate. And that led to some interesting conversations, and still I think leads to some interesting conversations at times. But we had to be able to show why we think there's ROI to our dealers with these increasing prices.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome, no problem. So I'll move into, I divided my thoughts here for churn into 3 buckets. So I have like 3 general slides here, and again, feel free to stop me at any time. So the first bucket I was thinking through here when I was preparing for this was to really look at the numbers, right? It's a churn is one of those things that will really, really catch you by surprise if you're not paying close attention to it, and might put you in a situation where you are really like flat-footed. And so the first thing is to really look at the numbers, be diligent about that. And so one thing we did where I was before is we looked at churn not just on a dollars basis, but also on a customer basis, right? And this might seem obvious, but I think it's important that everybody does that because you can have larger dealers or larger clients, whatever your kinds of clients are, larger clients who might skew your churn numbers, or smaller clients who might skew it in a different way, right? And so you want to get a sense of, okay, our churn for this month was, this amount of money, but was this many customers, and what does that mean? And then what does that mean over time, right? What are the trends over time by dollars and by customer? And how does that tie in with potentially, the types of customers you were selling if you look back whatever period of time, right? So, okay, we were selling a lot of huge customers 6 months ago, and these customers are churning now. And in the last 3 months, we've been selling a lot of smaller customers. And what's the implications of that going to be for our churn? And try to forecast that the best you can. So that's the first piece of info I would put out there, is to not just look at it by dollars or by customers, but to make sure you're looking at it both ways. The second thing I'd say here is, we looked at it every day, right? So we were monitoring it, measuring it literally every day. It was a topic of conversation multiple times a day. And that doesn't mean that, we were like reporting out on our churn numbers on a daily basis. We weren't doing that, right? We may have been reporting out on the churn numbers on a monthly basis, or reporting out on a quarterly basis, or for your business, it might be an annual basis, depending upon what you're selling. I think it's important to be measuring it every day. The next thing is we did a lot of work to do this type of churn analysis by dollars and by customers on a per rep basis. And what I mean by that is on a per sales rep basis. So, we saw that there were oftentimes these major outliers, essentially, right? Like you wouldn't expect, actually, of people who were just selling deals that those deals never stayed, and other people who sold deals and those deals, they never left, right? And it's important to really look at that and understand, okay, who is doing better or worse on their churn, And then the second piece of that, which comes back to like operations, how do you do something about that is, okay, if you see that this rep has a really great churn rate, or some other rep has a really poor churn rate, do you have them selling into the right kinds of customers, right? Like this might be a signal for you to say, okay, we have Suzanne selling into this type of customer base, and maybe she's a better match for selling into a different type of customer base. So let's try her on a different customer base over here where they have different commonalities as a customer, different archetype of customer. Maybe she'll perform better over there. And so we did a lot of that so we can make decisions as to where our reps would be most effective selling, not just from the standpoint of like acquiring new customers, but acquiring business that would stick with us. So I think that's critically important. And then the last piece is we put churn in some way or another into everybody's comp plan, right? So this was not an activity for just the account managers. It was not an activity for just the post sales team or the customer success team. This was an activity that we were all a part of, and anybody from your BDR to myself, everybody within the organization had some impact on their compensation plan tied to churn, and we would vary how much of an impact that would be. So if you were a customer success person, like you probably had a lot more of an impact on your comp plan with your churn performance, the churn performance of your base of customers, than maybe an acquisition rep. But no matter who it was, there was always some tie-in into churn for every person who was on the overall sales and customer support team. So that's my first slide. I can stop to see if we have any questions. I want to talk about any of that more before I move on.
Yep, Jason, we have one new question. And for anyone who tuned in after the initial remarks, just so everyone's aware, we're kind of doing Q&A on the fly. Jason, of course, is great, very nimble, and enjoys the conversational aspect. So there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. If at any point you have a question or want Jason to expand on something, just pop it into the Q&A panel and we'll get it answered. So Jason, we've got one question here. Did you have analytics or reports available to the dealers via a dashboard? And then same person, how many dealers were managed by one CSR?
Yeah, so great question. So I'll give a quick story to this, a quick anecdote. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's just the truth. So you guys are all like 10 steps ahead of where I was when I joined CarGurus in 2012. So I joined CarGurus in 2012, and it was my first SaaS job. So I had spent a lot of time in the automotive industry, some time in tech as an entrepreneur before, but this was my first time selling a SaaS product. And we, somewhere around 100 dealers, maybe 150 dealers we had brought on. So this is a few months into my job. The CEO founder walked up to my desk, and it's an open workspace, and walked up to my desk in like a fury, and was like, "Hey, what's our rate?" And I didn't know the answer. And not only did I not know what the actual number was, I didn't even know what he was talking about. It was my first time doing SaaS technology sales, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I couldn't really say that, I don't think. And so, I'm Googling and I'm scrambling. What is this? How do I figure this out as fast as possible? I mean, I knew about customer retention, but I never thought of it in the context of the word churn. And so, we started to really focus on, okay, we're acquiring all these customers pretty rapidly, and we were losing some almost as quickly at times. And we needed to dial into this churn part of the business. And one of the very first things, and this came from the sales team that we were just building out, was we thought of, okay, we should build a dashboard for our dealers, basically, that showed them some analytics on the kind of audience and exposure we're getting to our dealers. And so we went over to the engineering team and asked them to build something out that would at least show like how many impressions a dealer got on our site, or how many leads a dealer got on our site in a given month. Some really basic interactions. So the answer to the question is yes, we did have this. We had it. I don't think that early, frankly. I mean, it took them, I don't know, maybe about 8 months to actually build out the first version of this after we started selling. So we were selling into dealers probably for close to a year, maybe without any kind of really analytics or reporting for our dealers. Um, so that was a challenge at times. And then we did launch an analytics dashboard, and for the company, they've improved it tremendously over the years. But when they first launched it, it was really, really, really basic. I mean, it basically said like, these are your impressions, these are your leads, and this is the name of your store. And then the second question was how many CSRs per rep?
How many dealers were managed
How many,
on CSR?
yeah, sorry, how many dealers per CSR? Yeah, so I think in those days we were targeting like 1 to 100, if I remember correctly. I think that ratio, at CarGurus has changed a lot since then. I think it's a lot different, or very different for different kinds of businesses, different kinds of verticals. But I think we were trying to do 1 to 100 for CSR post sales in the early days. I'm sure that number is a much smaller ratio today. I will say that we had seen some level of an overall sweet spot between like 1 to like 250 that an account manager could handle relatively successfully. So that was a number we saw that was like, okay, we can crank it up here, so we don't have to hire a billion people, and like each person could do maybe about 250 accounts, and they can do those 250 accounts pretty well. But in the early days, we started with, I think, 1 to 100. One thing I will say about this that's probably just as important though, is it's not, I don't think the number is not the same within your vertical probably, right? So within your vertical, you probably have different archetypes of customers, right? So, and those different archetypes of customers probably need a different amount of hand-holding per se, or, account management. So if you have like a customer type that is, let's say, like what I would call maybe like an SMB or smaller customer type, they might need, check-ins, I don't know, let's say once a month, right? And then you might have a different archetype of customer who is a larger account that does her analysis biannually, and you really want to just make sure that your reps are prepared to do that biannually. And you want to look at that because oftentimes those kinds of companies might work in the same cycle, right? On an annual cycle. So you might have like these waves of like, there's not a whole lot to do for 6 months, and all of a sudden in June, July, there's a ton to do. And then again in like December, January, there's a ton to do again. And so you might have to say, okay, how do we throughout the year pivot or move how many CSRs we have working on an account throughout the year? It's based upon the archetype of account, right? So you might have somebody who's actually working on, an SMB archetype of account, for most of the year, and then for a certain period of time, that person moves over to a different type of account if they're flexible, if they can handle that. So that's one thing I would say is that even though most companies on here, I'm assuming, are probably operating within, well, I shouldn't make this assumption, but if you're operating within one vertical, you probably have different archetypes of customers within that vertical, and that ratio of how many CSRs to account will be different based upon your archetype.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that answers it. So I think you have some other slides to move on to.
Yep.
Great.
Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the next piece to talk about here is being proactive in creative. Hopefully you guys can hear me because I keep getting this sign that the internet connection is unstable. So to be proactive and creative. And so I mentioned a moment ago, looking at archetypes of customers or cohorts of customers. So I'll give you a quick anecdote on this one. So when we're like 2 years into, maybe 2.5 years into like our high velocity inside sales approach at CarGurus, and we're watching this churn number really closely. And at the time, we were looking at it as like a relatively aggregate number, like we're saying, okay, this is our churn rate for our entire installed base. And we started to realize that there were these inflection points where a certain cohort of customer or a certain archetype of customer tended to cancel. And so what we realized is that we had to onboard our different customers differently and carry them through this onboarding process past that inflection point, right? So we might have seen, for example, that a certain cohort of SMBs, if they make it past 3 months and they make it past 9 months, then there's like a 80% chance they're going to make it past a year and a half, right? Or going to make it past 2 years. So that's the kind of analysis we were doing. We were saying, okay, this customer type, we have these two inflection points of that customer type where they tend to cancel. We look at a different customer type, maybe like an enterprise customer type, and we say, okay, well, their inflection points are, 1 year in and 1.5 years in, right? So looking at these cohorts, I think was really important. Another thing here was following the blogs, and this one caught us flat-footed a few times. But we got a lot better at responding to this over time, which was like, knowing your customers, knowing what your customers are doing and knowing what they're saying, right? I think it's really easy. I'll talk about this more in my next slide, but I think it's really easy to kind of get into like your own routine as an organization, and you're focusing on your own goals, your own ambitions, the targets you guys need to achieve, right? And we're all so busy. There's so much in front of us to do all the time. But sometimes there might be discussions happening online about your product or service, or about the vertical overall, or about one of your competitors' products or services. And you want to be attuned to that, because it might give you a heads up basically of what might be coming for the company in the near future, right? So we started to learn to kind of follow the blogs, be proactive in the blog. So there was a blog around, if we were selling, hypothetically, if we were selling like luxury sheets, and there was a blog for like luxury sheet makers or luxury sheet sellers, people who make luxury bedding or something, you might want to be following those blogs and interacting in those blogs, and trying to stem off any potential losses before they happen, because there tends to be like this groupthink mentality that happens online, right? So somebody kicks off something saying, I'm super unhappy with what X company did, or the direction they're going in, or the price increase they just gave us. And then, some other person from the other side of the country, or maybe the other side of the world, tunes in to that blog as well and says, yep, that just happened to us too. And then next thing you know, there's this whole virality around, everybody having the same issues. And then your reps are caught like trying to stem off these cancellations kind of last minute. So I'd highly suggest to follow the blogs for your industry, or follow wherever they talk, know what they're talking about. And then my next bullet here, I see there was a question in the channel, so I'll talk to that in a second. Assess at-risk customers. So we looked at customers we thought might be at risk. One of the things, kind of coming back to the first question, one of the things we saw that was an indicator of our dealers potentially being at risk was how much or how often they logged into their backend analytics tool, how often they logged in, how long they used it for, and if we sent them multiple invites to multiple people, were all the people engaged in their tool? So one of the things we saw was, okay, like for our business in this case, like our business was not giving them a tool where they could assess their performance. Our business was driving them customers to their stores, right? But they had this backend tool where they could see the volume of customers we were driving to their stores, basically. And the dealers who were more engaged in logging in and seeing what was happening for the traffic we were driving to them were dealers that tended to stay with us. And so it's oftentimes the case that the quietest customers are not the ones who are going to stay with your business, right? Or the customers who you think are safe because you haven't heard from them, or you think they're safe because they don't call you every other day or something. Those people might be the people who might be at the highest risk of leaving, right? Because they're not engaged in the product set that you have to offer. So we try to look at some metrics to say, okay, how much are they actually using our product? The more they're using our product, the more value they probably see in our product. So let's track that. Let me look at the question here first, and I can come back to the deck if that's okay.
And Jason, if you don't mind, maybe just restating the question quickly before you go into the answer.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a question here that says, how do you deal with customers on annual contracts paying quarterly that ask to lower payments? Client's business has been hit by the COVID outbreak. Okay. Annual contracts paying quarterly ask to lower payments. Client's business has been hit by the COVID outbreak. Yeah. I mean, I think these ones are clearly tricky. I think the first piece is, I think a lot of this starts, and I'll talk about this maybe more in my next slide. A lot of this starts with like how you sell the deal, right? And so, you sell an annual contract. They sign an annual contract. Do you lay out at the beginning of that sale process multiple times for the people who are buying off of you, the stakeholders, that this is an annual contract, and we're going to reassess this contract and the value we provided to you as a client at the end of the annual term, right? Like, do you lay that out? I think that's one. How do you go about selling the actual deal from the beginning? The second one is, if you've done that, you've given yourself some legs to stand on to say, I understand it's a tough time. It's a tough time for all of us, and we're here to support you the best we can. We're happy to look at the contract terms when the contract comes to its end. I think that's an easier conversation to have, an easier thing to say if you've set the expectations at the beginning that this will be something you assess at the end of the term and not quarterly. If they're asking for discounts like during the quarter, right? And we have this like situation right now with the pandemic that we've never really faced before, right? You might want to remind your client that we all don't know what's going to happen, and so there might be a dip in service value we're delivering now potentially, and then in the next quarter we might overperform, and there might be this concept of like pent up demand, right? Pent up whatever it is you're doing. So maybe you're underperforming today, and because of that, you're going to overperform in the following quarter. And so therefore, since we don't know what's going to actually happen, and we're in an annual contract, let's assess this at the end of the quarter, right? So if I take a parallel on that to the tire and vehicle service industry that we're in at TireTutor, which may or may not be applicable to what you're doing, but with us, consumers might wait longer potentially to get their vehicle serviced, right? But then when consumers are back on the roads, everybody's going to get their vehicle serviced, right? And so we're going to go from potentially like this period of a little bit of lull to all of a sudden like our stores are packed and swamped and we're driving lots of traffic to our dealers, right? And so it would be unfair to us as a vendor, really, to reduce our price right now when we're going to overperform for you, when the pent up demand hits. And so I think it's part about having those conversations and laying that out, and really probably the most important thing, and this is again for my next slide, is to have the conversation, right? Like, in the absence of information, people assume the worst, right? So you need to have the conversation and tell people, here's what we're looking at. Here's why we see it this way. Here's why we can't do a discount right now, or we're not going to do a discount right now because here's what will happen afterwards. Maybe you do want to do a discount right now. Maybe you give them a better rate right now and they pay for it later on, right? So maybe like if your price is $5 today, I'm just making up a really arbitrary number. If your price is $5 today and you can afford to give them a discount, so they're paying $3 per day, that $2 you might make an agreement to tack on to their bill, when the business recovers, right? And so if you can work with them on those terms, it might be valued by them, and then you can go ahead and do that. So I think that all starts by just talking with people, having that conversation. And that actually like leads into the last bullet on here, which is around this concept of deferred payments, premium service, right? We're doing something like this right now at TireTutor, where we're basically telling our dealers, look, we can put you into our premium package right now that has a lot more value for you, will help drive more new consumers and clients to your business today when we know that you need them most, right? And we're not going to charge you anything for this, anything additional for this premium package, right? But when we come out of this in 3 months, then the price will go to what the price is supposed to be. So we're trying to use this in two ways. One, we're helping our dealers right now while they need the help. And two, we're locking in our dealers into like this premium product where they get more value and they're stickier to us, so that when we come to this whole situation, we have a stronger client base with higher MRR. So that's one way to attack it. All right, I'll move on to my third slide if I can get it to move. Just give me 1 second. All right, can everybody hear me still?
Yes, we can.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so the last slide I have here is really it's on everyone. It's the idea of churn and saving your customers. It's not a topic again for just a sales rep or sales reps. It's something for the entire business and not just the sales team either. And so along the lines of that, you want to sell smart deals, right? And one of the key things with this is like, while you're in this situation, if you're tracking your churn number closely, which you should be doing, especially as a startup with limited resources, right? So if you're selling a deal today that and the salespeople often know, and they're selling this deal today, that this is not a deal that's going to stick necessarily, it may not be worthwhile selling that dealer today or selling that client today, right? Because now you're going to have to dedicate resources into trying to retain that client in 2 months when they go to cancel, or whatever period of time that's premature for your business for when they should be staying. You're going to try to have to save that customer from leaving, and that's moving resources from maybe upselling a current customer that's super valuable, super happy and satisfied with your product, to this other client that maybe you shouldn't have sold or shouldn't have sold now, right? So I think especially as startups, we have to be strategic about who we're going after, who our clients are, and selling business that is valuable to us now, but also is not going to take a disproportionate amount of our resources to keep that business over time. Because we have limited resources. So that's the first thing I would say. And then if we look at like some ways to break that down a little bit, there are all different kinds of tactics you can utilize for selling smart deals today. So like one way of looking at this is like intro rates, which we might be doing a lot of those things today. Be careful with that. Again, you might want to be doing intro rates on certain kinds of dealers that they assess their business, they assess their financial situation, and you can get their business in today with a discounted rate, but they can afford to pay the full rate after the intro rate is over, right? If you're selling deals to people right now today where that intro rate is all they can pay or all they'll ever pay, and that conversation really hasn't been had, that when that rate goes to 2x or 3x, after this period of time, after this tough period of time, that they're going to stay and that they can afford to pay the full rate. You might be, again, like putting yourself in a situation where you're selling a deal maybe you shouldn't be selling right now, that you're going to end up paying for and undue resources to save that deal 3 months or 6 months from now or whatever period of time from now. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, a lot of people, I'm sure, are doing longer contract terms. We're doing the same thing here at TireTutor. So we're tying our longer contract terms into giving dealers better products, basically, right? So what we're saying to people is, we can give you, we're here to help in any way that we can. Here's one way we can help. We can give you a better product right now for less money than we would typically charge, helping your business to get more customers right now. The only thing we ask for in return is that this is a contract that's a much longer duration of time, right? Because we're going to partner. We're going to help you through this period. We're going to work together as partners through this period. I need you as a client to partner with us and tell us that this is a long-term proposition that we're doing together. So that's one thing. Another thing is around this concept of referral business. So, now is a great time to be leveraging your customers who are your largest champions as referrals into other clients, right? So I would be pushing the referral part of the business hard. If you have a referral program, now's a great time to really kick that off or put more effort into that referral program. So that's one thing to mention. And then when we talk about kind of like the the softer part of mitigating against churn, I think one of the things that's most important is to study who on your team is doing this well, who on your team is selling deals that stay, who on your team retains deals, let's say CSRs, who keeps your customers the best. And then once you look at those numbers, listen to their conversations. Like literally like listen to their conversations and listen to a lot of their conversations, right? And so if it's an inside sales team or inside, CSR team, there's oftentimes software that's available where you can listen to somebody else's phone call within your organization. Listen to their phone calls of your people who are best at this. What are they saying? What are their talk tracks that are different from the talk tracks of other people that have higher churn? And then take those talk tracks and bring those talk tracks to the rest of the team, right? This is, I think, something that is undervalued, underappreciated oftentimes as we focus so much on the numbers and the quantitative aspect of sales and keeping dollars and customer success operations and scaling these kinds of businesses. We look at a lot of the numbers, which we should, but I think oftentimes the art of selling and managing customers is ignored more than it should be. So I highly, highly suggest that you spend the time, if you're a leader within your organization, your startup, or your sales operation, to spend time listening to the people who are best at this right now. So either on the phone, like listening into their calls, or like getting out there into the field with those reps who their customers love them and their customers stay with you, right? What do they say that's different, right? What resonates with the customers? Because, sales is very emotional, and it's about the nuance of words, right? So what are the word choices that these people are using that are better? And I will tell you a quick anecdote on this, which is, I started the sales team at CarGurus, right? And I ended up starting 3 divisions of sales within CarGurus, right? I started the acquisition team, the technical customer support team, and what we called our dealer relations team and retention team, which was our team that saved and upsold our customers, right? And the person that I asked to go lead and build our dealer relations and retention team was a person that was by no stretch of the imagination was not one of our best salespeople. He was okay, but he was definitely not one of the best acquisition people, right? But what we noticed is that when he sold deals, his deals never left. Like they never left, right? And so we could go a year where like an archetype of all his customers who fit into a certain archetype, like they all stayed for a full year, let's say. And if you looked at that same archetype across the team, the average customer, the average rep had that archetype stay with us for 3 months or 6 months. So he would quadruple or double the retention versus the average for the team on like every archetype of customer that he sold. And so even though he wasn't a very high performing acquisition person, we went to him, we listened to his conversations for a month. And then we heard what he was saying that sounded different than others. And then we asked him to go build out this retention team, right? And then he taught the retention team those talk tracks that resonated with our customers, that kept our customers, right? So it's oftentimes not the people at the top that know the answers. It's the people who are in the weeds of it that know the answers, and they know how to talk to their customers. Find those people within your organization and give them autonomy, authority, and control to go retain your customers. So that's what I would suggest on that. So listen to your reps that excel.
Jason, I'm just going to interject quickly.
Yep.
Coming up on 12:45. So for all those who are tuned in, if you have to get to what is likely your next Zoom meeting, feel free to drop if you need to. But just so that everyone knows, it sounds like, and Jason, if you can as well, we'll go for another 5 minutes or so to make sure we cover the rest of these bullet points, which are all pretty relevant.
Sure, sounds great.
Awesome.
And then these ones are pretty quick. So onboard as hard as you sell, right? A lot of who stays with you is going to be determined on in those first few months when you're onboarding the client, right? So you work really, really, really hard to bring on a new client. Make sure that they understand your product suite extremely well when they come on board. Spend a lot of time onboarding them. MRR upsells during the month. If you look at the actual formula, and different organizations compute churn a little bit differently, but basically what you're doing is a snapshot of how many people, how many clients you had at the beginning of the month versus like how many people left at the end of the month, right? And that ratio of how many left versus how many were here at the beginning, right? One thing you could potentially do, depending upon how you're actually computing the math on your churn, is you could potentially say, okay, if you're making upsells effective during that month, that upsell number can negate against some of the cancellations that you're having in that month, right? So again, look for the people who are champions within your business, and those people who are champions within your business, maybe you can get more dollars from them right now, potentially. Maybe they're underpaying right now, right? And that could reduce your churn rate. And then the very last thing I would say, and this comes back to like, this business is about people. It's a business focused on humanity. Is like, lead with empathy. You got to have the conversations with people. Got to talk to people, hear what they have to say, learn from your clients. So that's my last piece.
I think I might have sounded the alarm prematurely there, because we actually went up in attendees in that in that and a half instead of down. But Jason, thank you so much. I think really, really helpful balance of what are some things that teams can do right now to protect against churn, and then as everyone is out there selling into new deals, what are some of the considerations to make to ensure that you have a lower churn rate sort of over time. Thank you again for all of your help and your insights. This is your second time around as a Venture Lane mentor, so we very much appreciate it. And for everyone who's on the line, look out for our next webinar, which will be this Monday at 12 p.m. We will have Brian Denenberg, managing partner at Agile Sales Method, talking about the transition to 100% remote sales force or sales team, both internally for the team itself and, of course, externally as things like field sales and account-based sales might be more of a challenge in the climate. Sort of how can you rework your strategy and make sure that you're moving through your sales process with the same productivity. So once again, Jason, thank you.
No problem. A pleasure.
For everyone on the line, follow us on LinkedIn at Venture Lane to get the information for that next webinar and all the ones to come. And that's
Ross,
it.
if I can say, that's my email. If anybody wants to email me any specific questions, feel free. That's my email on the screen.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for offering that to everyone. All right. Thanks again, Jason.
Thanks, team. Good luck, everybody.